Welcome back. In this video, I want to do something called code review, and specifically for the front end of our application. A code review is something that you want to do every once in a while when you're working with your code base, because it can always be improved. It's never perfect. And the project we've been working on is pretty good, but there's minor adjustments that we could make. So in this video, I want to go through a simple code review process to show you how we can improve the app so that you can take this code base and expand it and make it even better on your own. Let me show you a bug that we have. If I create a new user, Mike, and Mike has an email and password. Now, if I log in with Mike, and I have a sample face here that we can use. If I enter this face, I get my face detection, which is great. But when I sign out now and I register with a new user, let's call him Wes. Well, we never clear the state of the front-end application. So Wes now somehow sees what Mike submitted. So let's fix this. If we go to our front-end application and let's open up app.js, we have the onRoute change that gets called right over here when we sign out. And when we sign out, all we do is set state to is signed in false. But if we look at our state, we never clear out the user object, do we? The user object, which at the beginning was Mike, stays the same. And when we come logging back in as Wes, this has Mike's information. So we can do something interesting here. We can just create an initial state. So outside of the app, we'll call it initial state. And this initial state will have this entire object. So that this dot state will be initial state. All right. And we can now simply use this variable to change onRoute change. When we sign out, we want to remove all the information. So instead of doing set state is signed in to false, we can just say that we want to set state to initial state. Let's see if that works. I'm going to save. Go back to our application. And let's log in as Mike again. And we'll grab this face again. Face is detected. If we sign out now and sign in as Wes, we get an error, bad request. Oh, and that's because I misspelled his name. Let's try that again. Sign in. All right, there you go. We have Wes now with a clear profile and he doesn't know what Mike has been up to. All right, we managed to fix a bug, which is great. What else can we do with this code base? Well, there's a lot of things that I think we can clean up. For example, it's always important to have a catch statement every time you do some sort of a fetch. We see that we're using fetch, but we never catch if for some reason this fetch response to localhost image ever fails. The only thing we catch is we catch if the clarify API fails, but a good practice is to always have a dot catch after you do any dot then. So we can do something simple like a catch console.log to log out any errors we have. And that's something that will improve our what we call error handling to make sure that we don't have errors that happen without us knowing. So that's one thing we can improve. We also have the register and sign-in components. If you remember, those are very, very similar. We did a lot of copy and pasting, and the only thing that was really different with them was these input values. The register form has an extra field, which is name, and the sign-in, well, just add email and password. And we won't get into it into this video because it is pretty simple, and there's many ways of doing it. But we can imagine maybe having a shared component, maybe we'll call it form, and this form accepts different props like input types, so that we can set and share that component between sign in and register so we don't have this duplicate code base. All right, awesome. So that's something that we can do with our front end, just improve some of our errors and some of the duplication of code. We can probably even put this into a container component so that app.js, app.css, and app.test.js are all in a container component. But overall, the front end looks pretty nice and clean, pretty simple. As we expand the app, we can always move components and make them smaller and smaller if we want, so we want to reuse them. We already talked about how we can break down the sign-in and register component. Maybe inside the image link form, if we go to that component, we can divide up the input and the button so that we can reuse it somewhere. But for an app of this size, I think this is a good enough place to leave this application. So let's move on to the backend and see how we can improve the backend. You remember here our API, which is connected to a database, and we have our 4 simple routes. And we've kept this a little bit messy. We've had everything in just one file, server.js. But ideally, in a large project, you don't have just one single file that contains everything. Although this is just 4 routes, you can imagine this getting bigger and bigger. So one thing I like to do in the backend is create something called a controllers folder. And what controllers do, controllers are things that control whatever happens when an endpoint gets hit. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to create a new file, and this file will say register.js. And within register.js, we can copy this entire function, this entire transaction that we use, so that now we have app.post register, and we can call the function here instead of having that entire block. So let's say that we're going to call it register.handle register. So how is this going to work? Well, let's go into the register file, and I'm going to copy the function that I just copied out of there. Looking at server.js, we see that register.handleRegister will get the request response. So that when register endpoint gets hit, it'll receive the request and response and get called with it. So all we will be doing here is module.exports. If you remember this syntax. And within here, we'll just have a handle register function that we'll create. And we're just exporting it. And this handle register function will just be this block of function that we are creating. So we'll call it const handle register equals this block. But you may notice a problem here. We have the request and response, but we don't have DB or bcrypt. If I run this function in this file, I'll get an error saying, I have no idea what bcrypt is, and I have no idea what db is. And we have two options. We can either, within this file, place the bcrypt and connects imports and connect to the database, or we can pass these to the function. Let me show you. Within the register, well, I can simply just do a request response. And this request response will receive the request response as well as the database connects and bcrypt. So it has it available. And this is what we call dependency injection. We're injecting whatever dependencies this handle register function needs. So if we go back and now change our parameters to include the ones that we've stated and save, well, let's go down and see that, yeah, we have module exports. Everything looks fine on this end. If I go back to the server, and now within here, I do a const register require, and we give it a path. In our case, it'll be controllers and register. So let's see if this works. Go to tim@gmail.com, password 123, register, and looks like I'm registered. If I go to my database and make sure that we have Tim in there, I can select star from users. All right, I have Tim in there, and if I go to the login table, I have Tim's email as well. So we haven't changed any of our functionality. Everything is still working, but the only difference is that we've now made register just have one line and separated out the register function to just be in this file. So that if we wanted to have more things added specifically to register, we separate these concerns of the register logic to be in this file. And this is a better way of doing things. So let's follow suit and do that to the rest of the functions as well. We'll start with the sign in now. Again, I'll just copy this. And we see that sign in requires bcrypt and the db as well. And we'll say request response will be run with the function that is sign in dot handle sign in. That will have request response db and bcrypt. I'm going to make this smaller just so you can see better. All right, and we can create that up here by saying sign in, require, and we'll create that file right after this. We'll call it sign in. Go into the controllers. Oh, it looks like we got an error here. Let's just check this. Oh, cannot find module. That's because we're creating it right now. I'll say new file, sign in.js. Copy and paste our function. And we'll call it handle sign in. It'll receive the database and the bcrypt through dependency injection. And we'll export it handle sign in as handle sign in. Oops. Let's save. make sure that we can still sign into our app. We'll sign out. Sign in to tim@gmail.com, and his password was 123. All right, we get a bit of an error. Let's see. Bad request. Oh, and we want to make sure that, spell that right, bcrypt. Make sure we have that on the server as well, bcrypt. All right, let's give it a try. We'll go to sign in. We have wes@gmail, password 123. We're able to sign in. All right. Okay, things are starting to look a little bit cleaner. Let's continue with this one again, and you can see that there's a bit of repetition here. But hopefully this now makes sense. We know that here we're not using bcrypt, but we are using the DB. So we'll do request, response. We'll say profile, handle profile, and we'll say get here. And it'll be a request, response, and the DB. Again, we'll create a new file, calling it profile.js, const handle profile get, which receives the DB. And of course, we'll do module.exports. And we'll do handle profile get. And I'll show you again with ES6, we actually don't need the value. So if I do this, go to the server, let's do profile here and profile. And then finally, let's do our image endpoint, which does not need bcrypt, but does need the DB dependency. So we'll do request, response, image, handle, image, do request, response, DB. Create a new file, image.js. Oop, didn't copy that properly, so I'll have to handle image, module.exports, handle image, and make sure we get the database in there as well. Go back to our servers, and let's just make sure that this image endpoint works. If I go back, sign in as Wes, and I'll submit a face here. Oh, and I'm not getting the entry point, so we made a mistake. Let's go back here. Image is not defined, and that is because up at the top over here, we haven't imported it yet. Controllers and image. All right. Let's give that a go. Make sure we don't have any errors. Let's try that again. Detect. We're doing 1. And if we detect again, we're at 2. Everything is working. Awesome. So that was a little bit of repetition, but look how much cleaner our server.js looks now. We just have very simple files, or very simple one-liners. And somebody can come and look at the server and know exactly what our endpoints are. And anytime we want to add more functions to handle images, maybe when we want to do a post request with an image, maybe with profile, we also want to do a delete request. We can just expand on this and know exactly where our concerns lie with profile and just import them into our server as a way of handling things. The one last thing I wanted to show you is how we can clean this up. So this is really nice because you get to see exactly what each function depends on. But you can also do something like this, where instead of declaring the function, and we now, because of the way we're doing this, we're first running this function with db and bcrypt, and then it automatically receives request and response. So this function gets run, then request response gets called as well. And I know that's a little bit confusing and it's a little bit advanced, but if you remember our functions section, advanced function section in JavaScript, it's similar to that. We can go back to our handle sign-in, and within here, we can now have request response. I know this looks a little bit scary, but let's just see what happens. If I save this, sign in as Wes, and it works. If I add another image here, everything is still working. And this is a little bit advanced, and it might take a while to wrap your hand around it. We have a function that returns another function and then runs this. But if you look at it step by step, it's pretty clear, right? We're running handle sign-in with db and bcrypt. If we go back to the sign-in, again, we're passing this. And then we are also, when sign-in gets hit, we're passing the request response. So we're running the function again, request response. So that this order is the exact same as this order right in here. And this is a matter of preference. If this you find a little bit too confusing, you can resort to this other way of doing it. I don't think one is better than the other. It's just a matter of preference. I do like the fact that this looks a lot cleaner than the repetition here, but it might be more confusing for some team members. So I wanted to show you both ways. All right, I think that's enough for a code review. We've made this server a little bit cleaner. Our server.js looks pretty nice, pretty clean. We only have 35 lines of code here, and we know exactly where to go to find our controllers, how each route gets called. All right, that's it for now. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.